Okay, welcome to Unit 1, Lecture number 2. This lecture is going to be about lab safety. So we're going to go through the 5 basic rules of lab safety, basically what to do and not to do in the lab, and then we're going to use those 5 rules we just learned about and see if we can spot any observations and inferences, or if we can make any observations and inferences about lab safety. So not only is this going to be about lab safety, one, but it's also going to be about observations and inferences. And both are necessary for doing well thought out experiments. So let's get started. All right, so the 5 basic rules of lab safety. First rule, when do I wear goggles? Basic rule is if you are at all worried about whether or not you should have goggles on, you should have them on. Okay? That includes if heat is involved in an experiment, if you're using any chemicals, if you're working with any glassware, and if in general you're just asking yourself, I wonder if I should have goggles on right now. The answer to that question is yes. Wear goggles. My basic rule is if you get up out of your desk and move to the lab area, you should have goggles on. So we're going to go with that. The goggles are always going to be in the middle table of the lab area, and when we go over our lab safety guide in class, I will show you where those are. Basic rule number 1, wear goggles. Number 2, how do I handle glassware? We're going to be using everything from test tubes to beakers to flasks and many more. All of these things are made of Pyrex glassware, which can chip or crack. You're never supposed to use that material, and actually, if you ever see it, you're supposed to notify me and let me know so I can get rid of it myself. You're also always supposed to handle it carefully. So, two hands on all the glassware, unless it's hot, and if you're heating it up, then you're going to be using forceps. Also, always use clean glassware. If another class has not washed out the glassware properly and you're kind of worried about putting new material in there, let me know. We can clean it and make sure it's safe to use. Last thing I'll say about this is if you are ever heating any of these glassware objects, so test tubes, beakers, flasks, one thing you're always going to want to do is point the test tube away from your face. All of these items here are clear. So you can actually look and see what is inside of them from the outside of the container. You don't need to look straight down the opening of the container. If you're heating this, obviously it's going to bubble and could pop and kind of get in your face. So we want to refrain from doing that as much as possible, and practically never. And if I see you doing it, I will kindly not look down any of the glassware. Okay, so that's rule number 2. Rule number 3, we're going to always clean our labs ahead of time. I will do my best to get the lab out at least within 1 day, so that you have a chance to go home, read through the directions, and then when you come back, you have a better idea of what you're doing. This is to avoid, sorry about that. This is just to avoid mistakes in the lab, okay? As long as you're reading the lab ahead of time and you are following directions, we should avoid pretty much every hazard we could come across, okay? So we're going to make sure we read our labs ahead of time, and that way we keep ourselves safe and everyone else in our lab group and around us safe. Rule number 4 is just to know where the safety equipment is. Now, obviously it's a little hard for me to tell you where that equipment is in a video, but on our lab safety run through when we go through it in class, which will be next Wednesday, I hope, I will show you exactly where every one of these is. What I'm going to be showing you is the fire blanket, the apron, the chemical hood, the first aid kit where you can get some Band-Aids, the eye wash station in case anything ever were to get in your eye and you didn't have goggles on, and then where the goggles are, and they're actually in a little box in the front table in the lab area. So I'm going to be showing you where all of these things are. It's really just important that you know where they are in case an emergency happens. You're not, confused as to where you should go. Okay? Finally, the last rule on our list here is to just keep me, as the teacher, informed. If anything were to ever break or chip, it is extremely important that you just tell me where the break has occurred, and I'll clean it up and sweep up the glass and everything else. You're actually not supposed to touch the glassware or any spilled chemicals at all. So I would actually really, really not be happy with you touching broken glass. I would totally be fine with you breaking the glassware and then telling me what happened. Okay, obviously I don't want you breaking it intentionally, but if you somehow, accidentally broke a test tube and then came over to me and let me know so I could clean it up, I would be so happy. Okay, so please just let me know if something like that were to happen. Same thing goes for spilling something. And if the directions are getting a little confusing for you or something is, please call me over because I can always, help you get back on the right track. It's better to ask than to mix something up that you're not supposed to be doing. So, basic rule, please tell me if anything doesn't make sense or has broken or spilled so I can keep you safe and everybody else safe as well. Okay? So, 5 basic rules of lab safety are always wear goggles, handle glassware with care, be prepared, know where the equipment is, and let me know if anything happens at your table that wasn't supposed to happen. Right? All of that can get us a safe environment and allow us to explore science in a very fun and safe way. Now we've got those 5 rules on, what I'd like you to do is take a look at this picture. I'm going to pause, or actually ask you to pause the video for a second, take a look at the picture, and try and identify 3 observations and inferences that you can make about this picture. Just to go over that briefly before I ask you to pause, an observation, let's write this on here, is the act of looking at something and recording it down. Okay. Look at. To be clear then, an inference would be to use our knowledge to, expand on something we're looking at. Okay, so expanding on what we see. So let's go back to this picture now. What I'd like you to do is hit pause, make some 3 observations and 3 inferences, and I'll see you back here in a few minutes. So you can pause the video now. Okay, hopefully we're able to pause, come up with 3. I'm going to come up with 3, and we'll see if we're kind of on the right track here. All right, so as I look at this picture, one observation that I can make is that, actually it looks like Jim and Ben here. Jim and Ben are having a fight. Okay, so let's put that in an observation. Oops, sorry, put that out again. All right, Jim and Ben are fighting. All right, back to the picture now. What else can we say here? Well, we can also say that Joe is drinking a liquid out of a bottle that has a warning label on it. So, actually, was that Jim or Joe? No, I'm sorry, that was Joe. I think I said that the first time, but just to make sure. So, Joe is drinking dangerous liquid, something you're never supposed to do. Finally, look at you see one more thing here. Carl and Tina both have their safety goggles on and seem to be doing a science experiment. So let's put that on here. Carl and Tina are doing a science experiment. All right, so if we were to look at these three events and make inferences about them, we go back to this picture, we see Jim and Ben fighting. My observation was that they were fighting. My inference could be Jim and Ben don't like each other. The reason that's an inference is because I can't actually tell that from the picture. All I can see is that Jim and Ben are fighting, but I can use my past knowledge and see, well, okay, if Jim and Ben are fighting, and people who fight usually don't like each other, then I can infer that Jim and Ben don't like each other because they are fighting. Let's go to the next one. Joe is drinking dangerous liquid. All right, so if Joe is drinking dangerous liquid, I can pretty much infer, separate these here, that Joe did not follow. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change that real quick. Sorry, guys. Let's change that. So let's think. Let me redo that one. So if Joe is drinking a dangerous liquid, the inference could be Joe can't read. All right. So let's go back to this picture here. Joe has not seen the poison danger label on this bottle. He clearly has not listened to his teacher when they discussed lab safety rules, and he has started to drink out of the poison bottle. So I could infer that if he is actually drinking out of the dangerous bottle here, that he just either didn't listen during the lesson, or maybe he can't read the bottle. So that could be an inference. There's no actual way I can tell if he can read or not from the picture, but I can infer maybe he just can't read. Okay, last one here. Carl and Tina have their safety goggles on. They have the test tubes pointed away from their face. They have their, all of their lab safety wear in proper position. And they know where the eye wash station is, right down here. So, Carl and Tina are doing a science experiment. I can infer that Carl and Tina listened to the lab safety rules. Obviously, they may just know what to do, but it's pretty likely that if they're in a science lab with a bunch of other students here, and they are doing an experiment with safety goggles and test tubes in proper position and everything else, and they listen to their teacher because they know what they're doing and how to work in a lab. So this would be another inference. All right, so that'll just about do it for today. We are going to practice making more observations and inferences in class next week. And if you have any other questions or if you have any issues listening to this lecture or understanding the material, please come see me before or after school anytime. Thank you for listening, and I will see you back at school.